Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am very lucky slash honored today to be joined by the one and only Megan 18, superstar of TikTok and all things lettings and property mark as well. Megan, thank you so much for coming on today. So first question for you, why should anyone give a monkeys about appearing on TikTok? Isn't it just all for kids?
TikTok is definitely not just for kids now, Chris. We're all getting older and older, the users of TikTok. I think the thing about TikTok is it expands all different parts of the property transaction. So we are so fascinated about, oh, just get to the sellers, just get to the landlords. But we forget that those buyers and those tenants start their lives in that position and they will eventually become those people. Now, for many of us, we've been doing this job for a really long time. So it makes perfect sense to make that investment in early doors into making friends with those people.
And so do you find that your video content gets more traction with people who are, I don't say joining the property ladder, but kind of the ones aren't necessarily selling today, but the ones that have maybe tenants getting properties and people who are doing first-time buyers? Is that because they are that slightly younger demographic, which is more TikTok sort of baby at the moment, do you think?
Yes and no. I would say a good chunk of the questions I get are definitely from tenants and buyers, because they're the ones that don't necessarily have somebody to kind of go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or they haven't got that experience. What I would say is like I've picked up a portfolio of 8 properties off the back of my TikTok. And that was from a landlord that basically found it by accident. And then, suddenly was like, oh, actually, I quite like what she's talking about, and moved his whole portfolio over to me. So it does have the ability to create relationships with landlords too. And the average landlord's getting younger and younger.
So I've been binge listening to Gary Vee recently. So I did a podcast with Chris Watkins a couple of weeks ago, and he dropped in a few Gary Vee references, and I thought I better start paying attention to this. And Gary Vee was talking about literally about exactly what you've just said and how the age of TikTok is now increasing. So I think the two sort of younger platforms, one was Snapchat, one was TikTok. Snapchat is still very sort of young people messaging each other, and that's all fine. But TikTok is getting kind of older demographic, week by week, month by month sort of thing. So it's no longer sort of just the kids, it's now sort of the adults as well have joined the party, apparently. Apparently they want some mental stimulation on the internet as well. Who knew? So how did you first get into recording video content and kind of focusing your life on TikTok when it comes to the publicity side? What kind of first made you want to do that?
So I joined TikTok when there wasn't really any estate agents on TikTok. And that's really why my profile kind of built, because nobody was doing it. And suddenly I was the one that sort of stuck my head out and went, oh, let's do it. So it actually came off the back of becoming an ALA exec. And basically I said to them, right, so what is the main purpose of my role? And they were like, oh, you just need to communicate with your members in your patch. And I was like, cool, I can do that, no problem. And I was like, give me a list of all my members and I'll reach out. And they're like, oh, can't do that because of GDPR. So shall I wait for this phone to stop ringing?
I can't hear it at all. You're all good.
You can hear it.
Yeah.
So basically I was like, well, what am I supposed to do then? So I obviously started to like post on social media a bit more, try and tag people that I kind of knew in the patch, and kind of start going from there. And I then sat on a social media course put on by Rachel, who was within the ALA panel, and she does a lot on like LinkedIn, and so we're all learning about algorithms of LinkedIn. And she said, you know what? The next big platform that will blow will be TikTok, but no agents bothering to do it. Like nobody's brave enough to do it. And quite frankly, excuse my French, I just thought, fuck it, I'll give it a go. And the next day I recorded my first TikTok and I did a video on like the 5 things that we look at when we come to value your property. And it was like the electrics and the blinds. And obviously people were like, well, why are you checking the blinds? And I'm like, oh, well, we check it because of this. And then somebody asked me a question about pets really quickly off the back of that video. And so I did a video response about why landlords should consider pets, and it just blew. Like it just exploded. And I still get likes on it even like now. And that's what, 2.5 years later, it still gets good traction, like a consistent traction. And yeah, it sort of then people then started asking other questions. And then basically what would happen is that I wouldn't even need to create my own content in the sense of ideas. I was basically just responding back to what people were asking. And then when it would go quiet, I'd then chuck a little thing in the mix, and then it would all start again. And that's kind of how it all happened. So it built really quickly, really organically. And then suddenly people started to take notice and went, oh, okay, what's she doing? Like that works.
And do you find that how can I phrase this in a correct way? So obviously you're a very knowledgeable property professional, and the people who are watching your TikTok accounts and watching your videos, etc., may not be that knowledgeable in the property side of things. How do you find the level where you kind of you talk as if you're not, making it sound like you're talking for idiots, basically? You're saying, a viewing is this, talk to an estate agent, they're like, yeah, of course I know what a viewing is, sort of thing. I've done 1,500 this week, sort of thing. Whereas when you go to the public and go, right, this is what happens on a viewing, this is what happens on a valuation, and this is what an application form for rental is. How do you find that balance between giving across valuable information and not sort of dumbing it down too much? Or I don't know how to phrase that in a better way.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I'll be honest, that first video I did I recorded it about 4 or 5 times, maybe even more. And I'd send them to my brother, who's brutal. And I'd say to him, what do you think of this? And he was like, you sound too posh. You sound too estate agency. You've got your telephone voice on, because that's your natural position, is to do the hello, good morning. It's really difficult to shake that. And that's exactly where I landed. I'm in the pub and my friend turns to me and says, oh, Megan, I really want to get a dog. What do I do about it? And so I basically landed on a default position of talk to them like I would my friends, and not try and use the language that people don't understand. Or if I need to use that language, I will explain what that language is in a really easy way.
Okay. So let's imagine I'm an idiot here. Not too much imagination, dude. We shouldn't laugh about it. And I've got a completely blank TikTok account. So for me, full transparency, I upload on TikTok every day. That you probably don't know that, because I only have like 15 followers and whatever else, because I really put no effort into it. It literally, so the videos that appear on my YouTube Shorts channel repeat on there as well, which is kind of clips of interviews that I do and podcasts and whatever else it may be. So my work effort into it is like 5% of all it could be, sort of thing. I don't even upload to it myself. My PA does that for me. So it's very much off my radar. So I've pretty much got a blank canvas. So if you were me, or you were an estate agent listening to this and they go, I haven't even logged into TikTok yet at all, haven't even got my user account sorted yet, what is step one?
Well, you probably log in. There's probably
log in, get signed up, enter username.
log in and sign up. Yeah, that's probably a good place to start. I think it's really good to get yourself a username straight off the bat. So I've always been lettings in a nutshell. That's always been, and I actually do both sales and lettings. But that was my tagline, and it's sort of stuck, and I haven't changed it. You can go wrong. So, for example, our dear friend Toby Martin, he famously had a TikTok account that was called Lettings Expert. But one day we realized that actually what it said was Letting Sexpert. And so suddenly so rather than do the normal thing of changing his username, he just deleted the whole account, and started again. But basically try and pick a name that is going to be helpful. Now, if you're doing this for your business, it's probably going to be your business name. Let's be real. Mine wasn't for my business. It was very much a trial and error. Let's see what this does. So I think first, picking a really good username is key. And then secondly, you need to start thinking about what kind of content you want to make. So for example, what I post on my TikTok versus what we post on the location TikTok's very different. And mine's very much more talking to camera, talking about different things, whereas the location ones are much bougier platform, and it's more nice property tours and stuff like that. So I think understanding which route you want to go is super important, because you'll have followers that will go on either side, but they're unlikely to be interested in the other two. And that's what we've personally found. So I think that's the key, is making sure that you have a really good idea of what kind of content you want to create.
Okay, good. So you've got your account all set up and your username all done in there. And I think it's kind of a small tip for everybody. Try not to use numbers in your username. It shouldn't be called like Chris Webb number 75 sort of thing, because that isn't very catchy. But you could do like Chris Webb's estate agency, or Chris Webb talks about property, or whatever it may be. So we know what sort of angle we want to go down. Where should people kind of go for with their first video? Should it kind of tips? Is it advice? Is it what do you think most people should do to start off? Because I think probably your first video is probably your hardest video. Once you've done that, that works or doesn't work.
So if you're going to go down the route of kind of talk to camera, let's assume that that's the route we're going to take. I think you should have to think about what kind of questions you've answered that week. So for example, like, I get tenants going, well, what's a break clause? What does it mean? Great. There you go. There's your first video. Landlord comes in. asks you a question about tax, there's a video. So I think having a think over the week about what kind of questions you've been asked, and you think, oh, well, that was helpful to that landlord, that's probably going to be helpful for somebody else. And it's literally as simple as that. And sometimes you'll find one and it will really take. And sometimes you will do some and you think, oh, that was really good. And nobody likes it. Nobody's interested.
Yep. And I've kind of, I don't know about yourself on this one. I've generally found that whatever you think the level is, it's generally kind of one peg below that level. Is probably a pretty way to say. If you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do a thing about offers and offer negotiation sort of thing. Actually, if you kind of take that down a level from where you think it probably should be, that's probably around the right sort of area. I know when I go down the pub with the boys and girls now and again and chat about property, I might as well be talking Japanese sometimes. I'm like, come on, guys, this is like simple stuff when it comes to the property market. And they're like, we don't understand what you're talking about, sort of thing. So
Yeah. I think that's fair. And like, for example, like a really good example of that would be like a deed of trust. So for example, someone says, I want to buy a house with my boyfriend, but I've got more money going into it than he has. What should I do about it? Oh, well, you get a deed of trust. And I go, well, what's the deed of trust? So you literally say, what you need to look for is a deed of trust. A deed of trust can be drawn up by a solicitor. It is essentially a document that outlines who owns what money and the nature of which that money will be returned to them in the event of a property sale.
perfect.
Simple.
Yeah, good. I actually had not often I get angry at any clients. I would say angry is a strong word. Stroppy is probably a better word within my clients. But I had a client about a month or so ago who said to me, I've stopped posting on social media because I've run out of things to talk about. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I've just run out of things to talk about. And I was like, okay, bear with me. I literally came back 10 minutes later. I was like, here's a list of 104 things that you can talk about, which will keep you busy for the next like 5 years. If you just go through them and repeat through and change the format, whatever else, everything from what is a viewing, what's an offer, should you tidy your house, should you cut your grass, what does offers in excess of mean? So much stuff you can talk about because we're quite lucky in the UK to be in a industry where everyone's quite interested in property in a sad sort of way. So everyone actually wants to hear what you're talking about on that side of things.
I
So
think as well, if you think about it from that point of view, like that's like saying that you've run out of things to say on valuations, because essentially every valuation you do is the same thing. You follow a similar format for most valuations, but if you suddenly change your format because you've done 20 and you think, oh, well, done 20, so I better change them completely. Like, for example, if you did a video on pets 3 months ago, why can't you do a video on pets again? Just do it differently. You will say things differently. I answer questions differently every time. They've got the same general gist, but they will come out differently.
no, and I can attest to that. So I recently wrote down a list of about 70 or 80 video topics to talk about. And literally, I've written different options for presenting that topic. And it's gone, option one is do a video on it. Option two is to do some sort of AI picture on it with some text with it. Option three is a picture of me sort of thing. And I'll just rotate through those big topics sort of thing and just do a different format every time. So therefore, you've got, 5 different ways of doing it times by 70. Someone can do the maths on that, how much that works out as. So therefore, you've got almost endless content just based on those 70 or so topics, but just 5 different ways of telling that story.
Yeah. Can I just ask you a question, which you're probably going to have to edit out? Can you hear my phone ringing?
Nope.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, we
I
are
just
all
wanted
good.
to check because I didn't know if I need to go turn their phone off.
No, you're all good. I can't hear it at all. Absolutely
This
fine.
is a disaster for you. You're going to have to edit so much of this.
I know, so much work you make. I'll just leave it all in and just we just
Just leave it
rolled
all
it.
in. To be fair, I did a podcast once and they left the whole thing in and they started talking about them being called misogynistic. And I was like, hey, you probably want to cut that bit out.
Yeah, press that pause record button on this
You might want to get rid of that. I mean, I'm fine with it, but maybe you want to cut it out.
See how it goes. Yeah, quite. I won't say anything too controversial. So how would you stay on top of the trends on TikTok? Because I've obviously had a good stalk of your social media accounts, and there's certain things that are obviously there are trends that come through on social media that you kind of grab hold of and put your own sort of spin on it, sort of a mouth dubby sort of thing and whatever else it may be. How do you stay on top of those trends without spending your whole life on TikTok?
I'm going to tell you a secret, Chris.
I'm in for it.
There's an app that tells you what trends are trending. It's
Pen has come out of pocket and
oh,
is clicking.
here we go. Spoiler alert. It's called Trend Talk. It is a paid app, but it's worth it. So you pay, I can't remember how much it was, but basically it will literally say, these are the sounds that I think will work for your niche. And these are the trending sounds in the UK. Like, it's just like, there's loads of different genres. And basically Trend Talk will show you what's trending. So you don't have to follow it. One thing I will say though, and one of the things that cringes me out the most about people's TikToks is when people are complete slaves to a trend. Like, just because it's trending, it doesn't mean it's going to work for your niche. So don't assume that you should do it. Like, like for example, like for some people, like I can get away with quite a lot on mine because I've built it just purely being myself. So it means that I can kind of get away with it. But it's when you see like people who are 1 minute showing people around like super prime property, and then the next minute they're doing like a TikTok dance, and you're like, hey, like that's just not gonna work. So what I would say is you can use things like Trend Talk, or if you're an avid TikTok user, you can just save the trends as you go. But what I will say is don't feel you have to use them just because they're trending, because you may end up in a position where actually people are like, what are you doing? This does not work. Although I have a great one the other day that I did before the general election was announced about how renters reform basically wasn't going to help tenants. And I've literally still got tenants arguing with each other on there, like even now. And I'm like, guys, it's gone. Like, let's stop worrying about it.
Let it go, move on.
Let it go. It's gone.
So speaking of letting go and it being gone, nice sort of segue here. So obviously you're uploading a lot of content onto the internet, and therefore you are at the will of the systems and the processes that TikTok have in place. Algorithm, that's the word I'm looking for, in the background. So how do you kind of manage the expectation in your mind? Because I'm sure you've had it before where you've had a video that you kind of, I wouldn't say threw together, but you did a video and thought, 10 seconds, record it, upload, and it's probably absolutely flown and it's done amazing. You probably think to yourself, I'm the best thing, I'm the Steven Spielberg of TikTok and I'm amazing sort of thing. You've probably had other ones where you spent a lot of time, a lot of effort in recording something and it's been an absolute, downer on it. It's got like 3 views.
100% happens all the time. Actually really annoys me with our friend again, Toby, is I'm like, oh, that's gonna go viral. And then I'm like, dude, why hasn't that gone viral? Like, I don't get it. But just to put it in perspective, I'm actually pulling it up right now because I can give you the exact numbers on it. But basically, I do, like, some of my videos are, pretty off the cuff, and some of them not so much. But the other day I did a video really randomly. I don't even know why I did it, but it was about this octopus on TikTok.
I watched this video. Is this one about the octopus having eggs and giving birth?
So like basically this octopus, apparently octopus don't really breed in captivity, and this person got one as a pet for their kid, and it turns out it was pregnant and it had like 50 babies, and they have to all have little individual tanks so they don't like attack each other, because this is like a miracle for the octopus world. Anyway, and we were all waiting to find out if the mummy octopus died, because apparently after you give birth, the octopus is like the mum dies. Anyway, I did a video on it, 22,000 hits.
Wow.
Like, why? 465 likes, 108 comments.
Things I did not think I'd be talking about on the podcast when I first announced it coming out would be baby octopuses.
Absolutely. But clearly people, it was what the people want, Chris. Maybe we should talk more about octopus.
Yeah.
Octopus,
Stuff
octopi.
stuff the property stuff. We'll go straight full octopus and then kind of go from there.
Let's go for the viral content, Chris. People want to hear
So
about it.
how do you manage then in your mind? Because I'm sure when you put your octopus video up, you're thinking to yourself, okay, this probably might do well, might not do well. How do you sort of deal with the highs and lows? Do you kind of switch off to it as much as you possibly can do and go, actually, I enjoy the uploading process, or what? How do you deal with that?
I think I just go with the flow. Like, in many aspects of life, I'm a total control freak, and I really like to know exactly what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. But with content, it's like an ability to be a little bit creative and let my personality come out. Ultimately, the bottom line is if your content's not getting engagement, it's not TikTok's fault. It's the content. You're not. It might be that you're not putting it out at the right time. It might be that you're using the wrong keywords or the wrong hashtags or whatever. But ultimately you'll only learn that as you go. And I think that sometimes I load stuff up and think, oh, this is pretty good, and it won't do any well. And then things that you don't expect to do well do. And I think I never think, oh, that's really annoying. I just think, oh, your content wasn't good enough to get the traction. And that's, I know that's a pretty brutal thing to say, but so many people say to me, I can't get traction. Well, then stop doing the same thing. Change it up a little bit, because clearly it's the content. Because I can put a video up of me with no makeup on, my hair not brushed, and talk about an octopus and get 22,000 hits.
There you go, more octopus. That's the message take away from today.
Be more octopus.
I think that is a fair assessment. So I'm not so big on TikTok, as I've discussed already, but I do a lot of stuff on YouTube. So every week I'll have a long form video which will be on YouTube. So this one, for example, will come out on a Friday in the not too distant future, and then but every day I have a clip that goes up. So currently I've got my clips are booked up until August, September sort of direction. They're booked up for a long way in advance sort of thing. And of all my clips that have done well, bearing in mind I've had some amazing guests talking about some amazing topics and loads of value sort of thing, the one that's done the best is me saying about how I become an estate agent. So it's literally me
Yeah.
saying, yeah, I had an interview, I did so and so, I dropped some letters around with my CV on it, then I got the thing and I got a job. And that's my best video by about 10 times. And I'm
Yeah.
like in my mind, that's the worst one. Like me talking about me and what I've done to get a job is not exciting. But for other people, apparently, who knew?
Yeah, but I think people buy into people. And actually, one of the videos that keeps cropping back up again on my TikTok is a girl saying, I am going for an interview to be a junior negotiator. What questions should I ask? And it's basically me saying what I would ask. And it still, again, constantly ticks over, which always makes me chuckle because I think, why are recruiters not doing that?
Yeah,
Because surely that's like an easy win.
yeah, absolutely. So what would you say to somebody 'cause in most businesses? So I'm going to use Toby as an example here. So Toby Martin, been on the friend of the show, been on before already and can't get away from it at the moment. So at Property Mark 1 on Friday. And obviously Toby is very social media centric in his office, where if you talk to sort of Ben, the director, Ben's not quite so fussed about that sort of stuff. So obviously that's quite an easy divide in their office. But what would you say to an estate agency who maybe has younger staff who are going, look, we kind of see the future being this social media stuff and TikTok and all this sort of stuff, but they've got older members of team members there who have been there for the last 20, 30 years who are like, just pick up the phone. So how would you kind of motivate those older people or more experienced people into actually seeing what is more of the future?
I think if I was in that position, for me, I would be saying, right, we're going to run 2 sessions. We're going to have you guys train these guys on the power of a telephone. Because for me, my career began using a telephone. Like I remember the days when I had to manually upload onto Rightmove. Like, it was a painful time. I remember having a little box on my desk with my applicants. I couldn't have a CRM system in lettings early doors because they didn't exist. Like we actually used to use the sales one and sort of fiddle around with it. So for me, I think I would have the sales, the older members of the team or who are more focused on that direction, training that side, and then again those guys training this side, and then almost like agreeing to do both. I think both are actually really important, and that's where, for me, maybe we have an issue with millennials like myself and younger. I was really quite young when I got into a estate agency. I was only 18 when I got my first job. And so I've grown up in this career. And so I really value speaking to somebody on the phone. But I also appreciate that if you ask a millennial that's gone off to university, spent some years running around and started, say, in their mid to late 20s, that skill may not be there. But it doesn't mean that they can't be taught it. But it does mean that we have to install that because people don't know how to use a telephone like they used to, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I think that, is being skilled in both too much to ask in the ground? They're not mutually exclusive. It's not like you have to either be good at the telephone or good at social media, for example. You can and probably should be good at both or proficient at both, because ultimately the telephone is probably going to give you more sort of short-term gains, I would imagine, in the grand scheme. Then you can pick up the phone today, pick up the phone to an old market appraisal, get an instruction, away we go, high fives. But it doesn't mean you have to do the social media stuff, because that's kind of your sort of seed spreading for the future. You're going to reap that in 6 months' time, a year's time, 2 years' time, years and years to come. That is going to benefit your business. As you said, obviously the same videos come back and you still get people viewing your content. You're kind of investing in your own future there. So it's important to do them both. But how long do you think it's going to take for, if someone did a cold start today, social media, launching a new business, how long do you think it would take them before they even got an instruction or a market appraisal or anything off the back of it?
I think it could be a while. I
Yeah.
think it would really depend on the content. But let me ask you, Chris, let me ask you a question. I'm going to flip it around and ask you a
Oh,
question.
exciting. I like this.
So if I said to you, right, I can give you 10 leads of local sellers, or you can have 10 videos go 50,000 views each,
Yeah.
what are you going to go for?
Oh, is it exclusive? Is it? So it's a interesting one, because the leads that you would phone today are sort of money in the bank today. as I would see it. I would see the 10 local buyers or 5 local buyers as I can convert those, I can get them on the market really quickly, which I could then leverage and do some video content on the back of that, which then hopefully could kind of replace the other bit. The videos from day one that go relatively viral and get me lots of attention, that's great. But I would also say that that is going to kind of be more of a foundation for the future of my business. So that will probably pay off in 6 months' time, a year's time. Whereas if I don't get the instructions on today, I may well have starved to death in a year's time or 6 months' time. So I don't think, in my mind, there's one clear-cut answer for one is right or one is wrong. I selfishly would want them both, because I would want the short-term stuff that is the people who are ready to go on the market and the local vendors, but I'd also want the long-term process from there as well. So I wouldn't choose either. I think both are really important and both important to focus on. I don't think you can choose between the two. How about
It's
yourself?
like
Go on. You
it's
think
like
the
a
same?
chick yeah, I think it's a chicken and egg scenario. One thing I would say, and something that I've said a few times over the years is people are obsessed with the numbers that come up on their like TikTok or their Instagram. But actually, is it actually that helpful, my video getting 1 million hits? Like, it's lovely, great for the ego, lovely to read the comments, great for my profile looking really snazzy. But in terms of actual business, does it really matter? And I'm not sure it does really matter. And I think what I mean by that is I would rather create, and that's what I think we've managed to do at LL, is create a hyper local following where when we post content, it's being liked by the butchers around the corner and the card shop across the road. And I see Sharon in the street and she's like, oh, Megan, I saw that house on Palatine Road. I love it. I've sent it to Sandra. And I'll be like, great, I'll give Sandra a call. That is when social media becomes super powerful. But if your goal is to hit TikTok, get 1 million views on all your video, you crack on. But I'm not convinced that that is the golden bullet to fixing everything. I think it's a combination. Now, there are some estate agents that are doing amazing things by creating those profiles, often self-employed agents. But I personally think for a business, if I was setting up tomorrow, for me, the first thing I'd be doing is building my community. And whether that's partially on social media or partially going in a coffee shop and sitting there and making friends, I think that it's about creating that hyper local following that then feeds what you need it to do.
I guess it's that sort of digital shop window effect, isn't it? You know, people if they go, who's this Megan person I've seen around and about or on the internet, whatever it may be, or I've got a leaflet to my front door, I've seen a board or whatever it may be, they're either going to stalk you on Google, stalk you on Rightmove, or they're going to stalk your social medias. And therefore, you don't know which one they're going to stalk. So therefore, we need to make sure that all of them are really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. But the power of social media comes in that when I started here at Location, I wasn't, no one in Hackney knew me. In Reading, it was a different story, whole different beast. Anyway, they did this lovely video that was like, what happens when when you add, and it was like a load of my videos. And then you add it to LL and it was all their videos. And it was like, watch to see. And within a few days, I walked across the road to go to the card shop to buy a birthday card. And I walked in, they were like, oh, Megan, we've been waiting for you to come in and meet us. And I was like, that's the closest I've ever felt to being a celebrity. And it was because the hyper local following were like, LL have got a new person. We've seen her. So she's going to come in soon and we need to say hi. And she was like, oh, Chris, come back. Come quick. She's here. We need to go say hi. And that's the reality of when you create a hyper local following.
I love that. And on that note, Megan, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. You'll have to stalk my TikTok account to make sure I follow through with all this, but it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Megan.